more than half of the state school boards in the country have distanced themselves from the National School Boards Association over its infamous September 29th letter to President Biden that equated concerned parents at school board meetings to domestic terrorists. I know you've heard a lot about this, but more information, has come out since that September 29th letter that makes it very clear now that the administration actually had them, probably wrote the letter for them, and they went public with the letter to the president. They acted as the lemmings for the Biden administration. And as a result, 27 state associations have backed away from this organization. 17 have taken further action to withdraw membership, participation, or dues from NSBA, with Florida being the most recent. And even today, Arkansas, I read a report where Arkansas is contemplating backing away. Joining me now to talk more about this is Meg Kilgannon, Senior Fellow for Education Studies here at the Family Research Council. Meg, welcome back.
It's great to be here, Tony. Thanks for having me.
So what's the latest tally, 27?
27 have distanced themselves from the letter, and 17 have withdrawn their membership from the National School Boards Association.
So does the National School Boards Association, I assume, but it's not safe to assume anything, but I assume that they derive their existence off of the dues that come from these various states, or at least in large part.
They do, but they also raise money from organizations, particularly, interestingly, health insurance companies, because of the access they have and the policies they can suggest to public schools. So if the number of schools who think they're credible or the number of states that they're involved in is lowered, that certainly will affect their bottom line, as they'll be less effective.
So it's like advertisers pulling out of a show because they have access to consumers. And so if the consumers aren't tuning in, or schools are not using the information coming from the National School Boards Association, that devalues their standing with these other entities.
Exactly. They have a pretty big black eye over this, to be honest.
Well, they should.
They absolutely.
I mean, they were used by the Biden administration to do the dirty work of the administration. And I have, when I saw the letter, I said, there's no way that this organization knew the technical aspects of the Patriot Act and these different criminal statutes that they would put this in the letter.
Right. It did seem like they had some help with that.
Right. And now, of course, we know that they did.
They did.
And I'm not surprised at all that the Biden administration would equate these parents as domestic terrorists. And, of course, they're continuing. The Department of Justice continuing to push forward on this. But my point here is, number one, to thank listeners and others who have reached out to their school board members, their state school board associations, and said, hey, you need to back away from these groups, but more need to do the same.
Yes. There's a letter on our website at frcaction.org/schools. That's a model letter for anybody to send to their local school board. Not necessarily your state school board, but your local school board, asking the people who represent you in your community, did this letter express how you feel about parents? Did they speak for your values? And if not, have you let them know that you don't agree with this letter? Now,
do the local school boards also join as members of the National School Boards Association?
The local school boards tend to join their state level school board association, and it's because of pushback from local school board members that the states have pulled out of the national organization. So it definitely has an effect. It definitely matters.
So these folks are listening to parents and to citizens who are now weighing in on these issues.
Happily, they are. They are listening. And the louder that parents speak out when we are marginalized or told to be quiet or called names, as we often are, people who listen and watch this program are the kind of folks who have been concerned about education for years and have been pointing to some very difficult issues and concerns in education. And we're often called names. And demeaned because of our interest in protecting children's innocence and protecting children.
And I think one of the things we got to wrap our minds around is that we've kind of historically seen ourselves as cultural Minutemen. We drop our pitchforks and we pick up our muskets and we go to the battle as the Minutemen did. I actually think we've got to be looking at this different. We have to have a sustained presence. We have to finish this off. And I know this, in fact, I'm going to have an update here soon on the RNC and what the RNC did with this Pride Coalition. I know for a fact, in talking with RNC members, that many of you contacted, by the way, and I want to thank you for that because you got their attention big time. But after the Thanksgiving holiday, they think, oh, well, it's just past. Because historically, once we say something and we make our case and we go on to something else, there are some things we just have to be tenacious about and not let go of until it's fixed. And one of those issues is public education.
Absolutely.
We have them, I don't know, I would say on the run, but we certainly have their attention. I say we, concerned citizens of America. Look, I'm in this for the long haul. I see this as a multi-year campaign to take back public education, or at least neutralize the left's ability to use public education to indoctrinate and raise children who turn against their parents and hate this country.
Right. And we got to this place over time, so it's going to take time to fix it. We didn't just all of a sudden wake up one day and there was a huge educational infrastructure controlled by left-wing activists. That grew over time. But what we need to remember is the organizations that have withdrawn from groups like the National School Boards Association are not sending them taxpayer money anymore, right? That these groups are funded by public dollars. They're funded by our money, and they're using our money to ruin our kids.
Is there a red-blue divide here?
There is. There were a couple of surprising states that pulled out entirely. Illinois has pulled out entirely from the National School Boards Association, which surprised me. Most of the states that pulled out tended to be more Republican or red-leaning states. But Illinois pulled out. Pennsylvania pulled out. So that's good news. That tells you that it's not just one side who's upset about this. Public schools are for everyone. All of our kids have the right to excellent public schools, and we should all be comfortable there. We should all have a sense of community there because they're for everyone. Yeah.
Well, and again, our regular listeners would know where I stand on education. But for those that may be tuning in for the first time, I'm not an advocate for public education. I am an advocate for parents doing what is best for their children, and very few scenarios in public education today would be good for a child, given what's happened in public education. That said, I am not for us abandoning public education. I think we need to see Christians go into public education as teachers, as administrators. We need to see Christians go into the school boards to try to dial back all of this leftist indoctrination that has made its way into our public schools. We have a responsibility because we live in the community where 90% of the kids are educated in these public schools.
Absolutely. And we know that one-party government is never good.
No.
When one side of a two-sided conversation is the only one who's talking or paid attention to, that never ends well. And in this case, the people who are least able to protect themselves, children, are the ones who are caught in this battle. And so we need to make sure that our voices are heard, that our worldview is understood and respected and considered as we make policy that concerns children.
And all the more so when we see the unfortunate disintegration of the family and the downward spiral of society as a whole, because, for many single parents, public education is the only option.
That's right.
They have no other option. They're struggling just to put food on the table, clothes on the backs of their children. And so to think of homeschooling the kids or putting them into a private education is just not an option. Of course, that's why I think refundable tax credits to give parents that option of where to send their child, whether a single parent or not. But again, I just go back to this issue of education is the role of the parent. God gave children to parents and gave them both the responsibility and the authority to educate. We can delegate the authority. You know, I can send my kid off to public school or private school, and I can delegate that authority, but I can never delegate the responsibility.
Absolutely.
It comes back to me.
Yes.
God will hold me accountable. So at a minimum, parents need to be sitting down with their kids, whether you're a single mom, mom and dad, does not matter. You need to be having conversations about what's happening in the classroom.
Absolutely. What's going on in your child's school day? We had all the discussion about the lawlessness in California, and unfortunately, some of that lawlessness plays out in public schools and private schools
Right.
too. They're not. Schools are a reflection of our society, and they're not immune from
Well, they're a
these sorts
feeder
of.
system, I think, now for the lawlessness that's happening.
True.
And before we run out of time, Meg Kilgannon, for those that have the ability and the time and the resources and the passion, they should run for school board.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We need more people engaged in the system. There are a lot of school board members who, having lived through the pandemic with the rest of us and had to make those terrible decisions, there are a number of school board members who aren't running again. They're tired of the headaches, and that's a perfect opportunity for someone who thinks like us to get in there and give it the old college try. There are school board members who simply need to go on to retirement
Yeah.
because they need to do something else.
I helped some politicians retire in my day.
It's a good thing to
It's not
do.
that difficult, frankly. A school board race is probably one of the easiest, although the profile of it has raised a little bit and outside money is coming in. But look, knocking on doors, nothing replaces knocking on doors, drinking a cup of coffee, and having conversations with your neighbors.
Absolutely. With an army of moms at your back.
That's right.
That's a good situation.
Mama bears. Meg Kilgannon, always great to talk with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.